Hi, I'm Tim, and this is part 9 of the course on building products with JavaScript. And today I want to talk about adding Twitter Bootstrap, Redux, and Redux-Observable with RxJS to our React client-side project. So first of all, let's start with Twitter Bootstrap. If you are not familiar with this, it's a CSS framework, which is, I guess, it's the most popular CSS framework out there. It's done by Twitter guys, and it's called Bootstrap. The current version is 3, but the version 4 is coming soon, and there was some weird decisions they did by basically closing all version 3 issues and saying we're no longer supported, but we're going to use it anyway because it's popular, and it's basically one of the first CSS frameworks that basically changed the way that you could develop front-end UIs, so it's a good start for you. Basically, even if it's not supported anymore, you can then later switch to something different that, say, works better with React, because Bootstrap still requires jQuery for some of its functions. Okay, so I'm gonna go here to my commits. There's only 3 new commits here, so if you watched my live stream, you know what I did, but let's just go over it really quickly. To add Twitter Bootstrap styling, I did a very simple thing. First of all, I installed it with npm. As you can see here, we installed it 3.3.7, which is the latest version. The next thing I did is I imported Bootstrap min CSS, which is the CSS style of Bootstrap. If I would to import just Bootstrap here, that would actually import the JavaScript from it, which is not what we want because we don't actually need JavaScript since we're doing React stuff. So I explicitly imported the CSS from the dist folder there, and our Webpack loader will take care of everything else. And then just to style the components to see that it actually works, I added some classes to the root container and to the hello world page, which basically is now a Jumbotron. That's really it. The styling is a super simple thing, there's no magic, and if we're talking about React, you generally want to take a CSS framework that is doesn't have JavaScript in it. Yeah, for example, I really like this Bulma thing, which is, it's version 0.2.3, and it is Flexbox based, so which means it won't work on older browsers. But since it's Flexbox based, it has a really cool things like the proper tiling that scales everywhere, really cool elements that you can do only with Flexbox basically, and that will be very painful to do with like traditional old CSS. And it's very easy to use because you just have like a couple of classes. Comparing it to the same Bootstrap that has like a ton of classes, this is way easier. But again, this is more advanced stuff that like once you get a grasp of Bootstrap, you can go ahead and look at other things. All right. So next part is Flux Architecture and Redux. So let's start with Flux actually. If you never heard about it, or Flux, I think the guys from Facebook pronounce it. The Flux architecture is the thing that was invented basically by the people at Facebook who created React, and there was a way to cope with state changes. The idea is that simple. Once you read all this stuff here, it can be a bit confusing. And by the way, all the links that I am showing now and I'm mentioning will be in the comments to the video, so go ahead and look there if you want to read it yourself. But if you try to read that, it's written in a bit of a sort of scientific language, or I wouldn't call it scientific, but sort of a bit tricky language that can be confusing at first. But the actual idea of the whole thing is dead stupid. So if you look at this image here with action, dispatcher, store, view, this is the whole idea of Flux, so that the workflow in the app only goes one way. Action tells dispatcher to dispatch something, dispatcher tells the store what to do, store changes something and tells the view, hey, I changed. And the view re-renders basically with the new data, yeah? Those actions can be caused either by the server-side interactions, say, the event from server, WebSocket events, or polling or whatever, or by views as you can see here. But in reality, it all goes like in a circle, yeah? So like if you close this action over here and just imagine that this is a circle, this is basically a Flux architecture. Very straightforward. Everything else is just an addition. The problem was that the initial implementations of Flux architecture was pretty complex and non-extendable. Like the one that the Facebook guys did, I think nobody ever used it because there was like a way better implementations right away that was simpler and easier to use. Along comes Dan Abramov, who created Redux, which is a simplified predictable state container basically for JavaScript applications, as it says over there on the page. It is a very simplified Flux store and a dispatcher in the same way that works in a very, 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 very simple and functional way. And it is, yeah, as you can see, it's like tiny. It's like 2 kilobytes. It's super tiny. So just to illustrate how it works, basically you have initial state, which is an object which has, I don't know, hello world, right? And you have your array of actions. Basically, from the Flux, if you take the Flux architecture, there are actions, right? So action 1, action 2, action 3, and so on and so forth. So there is a set of actions, and the actions array changes over time, yeah? So we can add new action. We cannot really subtract it, but I will talk about that a bit later. So the cool thing is like the time traveling aspect of it is really awesome. But basically the idea is that, you know, you have a set of actions that changes your state. So all that Redux does is actually takes this actions array and does reduce. And then we have action and state. And what it does is just applies each action to the state and passes initial state as the first value. So if you are not familiar with the array reduce function, go ahead and read on Mozilla Developer Network. They have a pretty great explanation for it. But basically what it does is it takes all the values in array and reduces them to new values. So this is gonna be new state. And yeah, we just, you know, apply action to the state and do that until we end up with a new state and repeat that once the actions array actually changes. The cool thing is that those actions are just functions that take in state and then return something that is again state but changed, yeah? Awesome thing is that you can return the same state, but then do something inside. So say we can create console, come on, log state. We can create logging reducer, right? And if I would just like logging reducer, I will put it here. It will actually just log the state and do nothing with it. And this is what basically, I think Redux calls logging middleware. And the thing is that basically it's a bit tricky. Basically, the implementation of Redux is a bit trickier because it has this concept of middleware, which is again applied. I think it's basically wrapped around all the actions. So you have these middlewares that are applied after or before the actions. I'm not sure about the implementation details. But you get the idea, hopefully. So like we have the logging middleware, which will log at each state. And this kind of approach with middleware allows for the biggest advantage of this Redux, which is the ecosystem and tooling around it. Because it is so extensible, you have some really, really, really great things here. Like, for example, Redux DevTools. So I have my project open here. So this is what I already wrote. And this is the Redux tools, which is a Chrome extension now. And as you can see here, so if I click on the button now, we actually see the whole events dispatched. And I can see the state changes here. And the cool thing is I can actually roll back. So I can, you know, say, okay, I don't want those events. I don't want even, so I only want init, or maybe I only want the last event. And this is not like, this is example of a thing, you know, that you would use daily, but this is not the coolest thing. For example, there is Redux VCR, which looks and works quite amazingly. So this is literally a VCR that allows you to record and replay Redux state changes. So for example, I can imagine the use when you can actually put it in your website in production when it's stable, to allow users to press a button and record the bug that they found, so that you can actually reproduce it reliably in production. And the tooling like this is what makes Redux really powerful. Okay, there's actually also a lot of really cool articles, tutorials, and talks about it. So if you are interested in finding out more, I would recommend going to the Redux website and looking at all of this stuff. There is even Egghead course from the Dan Abramov himself, which explains Redux very well and shows you how to actually build it, because again, it's like 2 kilobytes, it's really tiny and really easy to do. So if you are interested, by all means, go ahead and look at all of this and read that, because it is really great and it's really interesting to learn about all of that. So this is Redux. Now, the thing is that Redux is a solution that is generic, yeah? So you can really use this code anywhere. And it is actually used in a lot of places. For example, the new Angular 2 stores are using Redux IDEA, so it's RxJS based, but we'll talk about that a bit later. But you can use it with pretty much any framework out there. And as you can see here, there's a React, there's Angular, Angular 2, Backbone, Feldcore, Deco, and I'm pretty sure you can wrap it on for just about any front-end framework out there. Again, another advantage of Redux. But we're going to work with React here. So we're going to use React Redux, which simplifies things for us. And it's a bindings for Redux that allow you to easily connect your Redux stores to your React components. And this is done by using 2 tags. One of them is provider and the other one is the function connect. I'm going to go ahead and open this React Redux thing. One note before I forget, I had to roll back React Router in the project to version 2.8, which is the current stable one, because the current React Router Redux, which we need for transitions, doesn't support the Router 4, which was pre-release. And actually, let's have a look. So in theory, React Router 4 should actually should not need all those wrappers and components to synchronize with Redux. I think they had this. Yeah, there you go. So they have this controller router, which should allow integration with Redux as easy as integrating input with Redux, which is basically just using a tag. But as far as I looked last time, it wasn't published. I mean, this is a pre-release build, so hey, had to roll it back. It was my own risk for taking on the pre-release build and testing it out. I really like the syntax and I really like the idea of just using one controlled router where I can just connect Redux easily without all this React router Redux thing. But I had to roll it back, so that's the reasoning behind it, so that you just know and not get surprised what happened. That means that I had to actually change the app wrapper, which is no longer browser router, it's just a container now with children. And here's what I did with, oh yeah, by the way, if you did notice, I added the yarn log file, so we're now using yarn package manager, which is like 5 times faster than React, and specifically for this project I think it was like about 3 times faster, which is always great. So let's have a look at what I actually did. Let's start with the home index.js file. So I added just the Redux itself, and the way that you connect it to your components is quite easy. So we have a stateless component, which is just a function, right? Takes in properties. In this case, I destruct properties for onClick function and world keyword, world property, which is our world keyword, whatever is hosted in there. And then I use this connect function from this React Redux package that actually connects the state or the Redux store using those functions that I defined here to our component. So first function, it maps state to properties. By state, it means the Redux state, and by properties, it means obviously this component's properties. So as you can see here, I take the state and I map it to the world property. So I take this hello world piece of the state and map it to world. And then I dispatch, I map the dispatch to properties. In this case, I create this onClick function that dispatches hello world action, which I import from our store. And that's basically, that's how you connect it. Additional thing you need to do is you need to wrap your router into provider. So this is again part of this React Redux thing. This is what actually passes your store to all the components and why Connect actually knows where to take this state from. So this is like important bit. But this is actually all you need to do to connect Redux to React. It's not too much, but still a bit of a boilerplate. Talking about router, it is a bit trickier. So again, I think it's all in this file actually. So what you want to do is you want to actually synchronize your history with the store so that the store can react on the page changes. And you do that by creating a new history type, which you pass on to the router, at least for the current stable version. And then you have this helper sync with sync history with store function from React or Redux, which you just call in browser history and your own store instance. And that's about it. And as I showed before, sorry, where's my, yeah, there you go. You can actually see here's an event that was dispatched on location change, and you can actually react to that within your reducers, right? So this is the easy part. Again, all the links to all those packages and everything will be in the description. And most of the stuff that I did was actually just follow the tutorials here. So you can very much repeat it yourself and, feel free to ask questions if you have any. Okay, now we come to the fun part. ReduxObservable and RxJS. So what is the problem with RxJS and the actually this sort of approach? The problem is if you have your action, or rather this sort of approach assumes that you can actually return state, right? But what happens if you cannot, if you need to do XHR request, or you need to do something that returns a promise and you need to wait until it resolves to return a state? You need to be asynchronous basically, right? And by default, Redux doesn't know how to do that because it's a very stupid thing, right? So the way it's solved is by using these middlewares. There is a bunch of them. All of them do kind of allow you different things. So there's like Thunk, Promise, Axios, I think there was, yes, Saga. All of those are working with async action creators and async reducers, right? I picked ReduxObservable as one of them because I think it would be fun to show you RxJS in addition to everything, because you probably are familiar with like promises and maybe even the generators, which is used in Redux Saga, but you are most likely not familiar with RxJS. So I thought it would be fun to sort of teach you two things at once. Maybe it will be information overload, but if you try to figure it out and learn it, you will see that it can be useful in a lot of places. So what is actually RxJS? It's reactive extensions. This is how it's actually called. I think it was reactivex.io. Yeah, there you go. So this is the website of Rx or reactive extensions. It is an API for synchronous programming with observable streams, as it says. So basically the general idea of Rx is that everything is a stream, but you can work with it as if it was an array. So sort of they look at the stream as an array over time. And it's developed by Microsoft, and it's actually available for most of the languages. As you can see here, there's like a whole bunch of them. I think basically if the language have any generics, then you can have RxJS or Rx in it. For example, Golang doesn't have any, so you cannot really have Rx in there, but you do have them for most of languages. There is really great article by Andres Taltz, who is a developer of Cycle.js, which is basically a Redux-based alternative to React and Redux. It's like sort of all-in-one framework. This article is called Introduction to Reactive Programming You've Been Missing, and it explains what is Redux and reactive programming in general really well. But here's like, the example of why Redux is really cool. Say you have a stream of clicks, so each of those bubbles or circles is a click. They obviously happen over time. The thing is that with Redux you can actually do this. You can work with them as if they were synchronous. So you can say, okay, I want to throttle them by 250 milliseconds and then buffer them, which means it will take the intervals of 250 milliseconds and then group all the clicks into one point, right? Into one entity, I guess. And then you can map this into the function that will get a length of these lists. So as you can see here, it's now a number. So here we have 1, 2, 1, 3, right? Then we say you want to filter that, so you can actually do that. And in this case, we'll only get two circles out, the one with 2 and one with 3, obviously, because we're filtering more than 2. And then you can subscribe to it and actually get the results. So you can, for example, implement double click like this really easily. And, any data that actually works with sort of a synchronous continuous data delivery, or any function, I guess, that works with a synchronous continuous data delivery is way easier with Redux.js than with anything else. Yes, basically everything is a stream if you look at it on a correct angle, and it can help you a lot. So I will, again, this link will be in the comments, so go ahead and read it. It really explains really well what Redux.js is. But for now, you just kind of know that it is sort of array over time, which you can use, your sort of functions like map, reduce, I don't know, whatever you can imagine array functions, and in addition a bunch of Redux specific functions. They had the docs somewhere here. Wait a second. It has a lot of operators that are actually really useful and allow you to do a lot of very cool things. So we have our observable, there we go. And this should give us a list of operators. Yeah, so all of this sort of things like, buffer, combine, concat, debounce, delay, distinct, exhaust, filter, find. You can do a lot of those things, and all of that on values over time, which is like extremely powerful. We're using a Redux.js 5 release candidate, which is more or less stable now. I think they're just like polishing out bugs in there, so we're gonna be fine. This is as per documented in ReduxObservable here. To make our Redux asynchronous, we're using ReduxObservable. So as you can see here, I've added ReduxObservable and Redux.js. We needed Redux.js here because by default ReduxObservable only takes in the very basic Redux.js functions, and if you have a look here at troubleshooting, I believe, yes, it will basically say Redux.js operator are missing, so like type off type, switch map and all that kind of stuff. So to add all operators, because the new Redux.js version is modular, you just import the whole thing, and that's exactly what I did here in the client and in our entry point. Right, so how does Redux.js or ReduxObservable actually works? Okay, we don't need that anymore. There are two things. Thing number one, you actually, it works as a middleware. So you will actually have two things. You will have your typical observer, god damn it, words. You'll have your typical reducers, which in this case is observer. God, why am I always saying observer? It's a reducer that reacts to two events. The first one is action hello world, which will say, okay, we started our action, and then is hello world end, which will say we ended our action. And in the start, you do something like, indicate that you're actually started, so like say loading. And in the end, you use the payload of the action, or whatever property you decide to use. I just used the same one as the Redux Observable tutorial did, and you assign that to your state. That's it. It's basically the reducer becomes very, very dumb. All the work happens in these epics, which are wrapped into the combine epics function from ReduxObservable, and later on they are wrapped in this epic middleware, and they basically work together. So here you can see that what we do is we take action. This $sign on the end means that the action is actually an observable stream which we can work with. We apply of type operator, so basically we filter it by type, and the type should be equal action types hello world. So whenever the hello world is dispatched, we switch map, which means we create another observable and wait for it to finish, and then dispatch that value here. And inside we just wait for 500 milliseconds and then dispatch the end with the payload world, right? So it's basically we just wait a bit and then say hello world. That's it. Again, quite a bunch of boilerplate because we had to define action types, we had to define actions, we had to define all this like epics and reducers. But in the long run, this all allows us to use stuff like DevTools, allows doing like time travel debugging, all these things. So I think it's worth it, especially if your app is really big. So again, nothing changes here. We still use dispatch our action. So basically the only thing that changes is middleware. And why am I always swiping left? Here's what we want. So if I refresh it now, you will actually notice that when I click, this becomes loading. And after 500 milliseconds, you see world. So this actually dispatched, you can see it changed click me to loading, and then it changed it to world, which actually came from our Redux Observable epic, right? So this is really great because in this case, it's a very dumb thing, but you might be thinking like, why do I want that? That sounds stupid. I just want to do normal stuff like, who cares about that switch map and everything. So the cool thing is that I can remove that observable over here and say data, say there was, wait, let me see. So we can try to do something cool right now. Why not? Let's go to the docs once again. There is a thing called RxJS DOM, and there are Ajax. Yeah, there is Ajax request, I think. Let me see manual. So Ajax. Do they have Ajax? No, they don't have Ajax here. That makes me sad. Okay. Do they have Ajax here? No, they don't. All right. But the basic idea is that, no, wait, let me try to find the Ajax. I mean, why not? Why the hell not? If you are tired of looking at me trying to figure that out, then you can as well close it because that's all I have to say for now. I just want to show you why observables are so powerful. Let me just see. So we need sync subject util. No, it's not an util. Did they separated it in this different package or something? RxJS Ajax. Maybe it's, oh wait, it's probably in DOM, right? So source operator, is it here? No, those are the observable operators. Right, let's try to find it. DOM Ajax, there we go. Okay, so we have observable.ajax, and it says Ajax creation method from observable DOM. Okay, so what we can do is we can say observable Ajax, right? And then let's see how it actually works. They are, I mean, it is a release candidate, so obviously there's not like all the things are available, or I mean documented, I guess, in this case. Okay, so we have this Ajax creation method, and we can get, okay, so HTTP bin, I think, get, yeah, let's, for example, we get this, right? So this is a synchronous request. I actually can try to do that and then do JSON stringify, just stringify our data. Wait, that is wrong. Let me, you know what, let me just move that over here. And there you go. So I just changed our timer to asynchronous requests, and exactly the same function worked in a way that, you know, you expect it to work. You can actually map over that. So in this case, we mapped it just to JSON, right? So, but if I say map data, for example, I don't want the whole JSON. I want just to, so if we take our network tab and see our request, so preview was this, we can say data args test, and we say test async 20 world, right? I should see hello async world in here unless I screwed something up. Can read property test of undefined. Well, I did screw something up. So args, what did I miss? I probably missed it. Oh yeah, because that is wait a second. Do data console log data, because the data is not actually data, it's a response here, right? So let's have a look how the response actually looks. It's Ajax response, and we want the response object. Okay, so what I do is I map response to response, right? So that will, this way we will have actually response here, and then we can map it to test, and this will give us hello async world. So there you go. You can easily work with asynchronous requests like this, which is really, really powerful. And, you know, if you're not convinced, go ahead and read a bit more on RxJS and see how you can do very complex things in a very simple manners. Like I think the most famous RxJS example is the auto completion or type ahead, whatever you call it. But yeah, this is the general idea behind using RxJS here. And I think, you know, learning it will actually make you solve some things way faster. So I would spend your time definitely trying to figure out how that works. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you for staying with me. The next video is gonna be on finishing up the app itself, because we've set up everything we need right now. And then also creating the tests for our React components, right? Because this is the only part that we don't have so far, if I'm not mistaken. So I think I'm gonna do 1 or 2 more live streams before creating the next video, which will explain the testing and show you the final code. Yeah, I think that's about it. So thank you for staying with me, and as always, see you next time. Bye.